Thank you very much, Delaney. Dr. Margaret Flowers works full-time for a national health program, which is one of the things we're not getting because of the cost of war. She's currently the Congressional Fellow of Physicians for National Health Program. She's a member of Mad as Hell Doctors, and Dr. Flowers has been arrested several times in this very city for demanding universal health care. Dr. Margaret Flowers.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. It's a tremendous honor for me to be here and stand behind the veterans. They are leading the way. Our country has gone completely off track. Not only do our policies abroad harm ourselves and our planet, but we're harming ourselves in this country through lack of jobs, education, lack of health care, people dying of preventable causes, and we need to end this. We have tried the traditional tools. We have tried other ways of advocating. We have tried educating and organizing, and while all of these tools are important, they are not sufficient, and they have not been sufficient. And so I call on all of you, if you love this nation, if you desire peace, if you want to see jobs, education, and health care, if you want to see us lift our people up, then we must stand together. The veterans are showing us the way, and I call on all of us to stand behind them and to be persistent. Today is not enough. Today is a beginning. But we must continue and grow until our voices are heard and we cannot be ignored. Thank you.
What's happened since 2008? Guess what's happened? We've doubled the number of troops in Afghanistan. 3 times as many U.S. casualties, that is, killed. 5 times as many casualties wounded. And go up to Walter Reed if you want to see what that's all about. We need to spread some truth around and end this violence. You know, you look around in the 21st century here, and although I see hundreds of prophets here in front of me, well-heeled ones, well-respected ones that get media attention are very few and far between. That's why we are so fortunate that Dan Ellsberg slopped over from the 20th century into the 21st century and is still with us. But I'd like to say a word about prophets. There's one that really dwarfs all the others in our history, and that is Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said in this context what our mission really is. He said, a boil can never be healed as long as it's hidden. It must be opened to the natural healing of air and light. It must be punctured with all its pus-flowing ugliness to that light and to that air before the disease, the injustice can be healed. He went on to say, injustice is just like that. Injustice and war must be exposed with all the tension that the exposing creates to the light of human conscience and to the air of public opinion before it can be healed. That's what we're about here today. We're going to expose this. We're going to tell the president he's got to stop these foolish wars. It's a march of folly into Afghanistan as it was into Iraq, as it was into Vietnam, and so forth. Last thing here is from another prophet, Dan Ellsberg and Dan Berrigan. Okay, Dan Berrigan happens to be a favorite of mine, and he challenged all of us, and I think most of us fit this label. He says, you know, those who say, let us have peace, often tack on, but let us risk nothing. Let our lives stand intact. Let us know neither prison, nor ill repute, nor ridicule from friends, nor disruption of ties. There is no peace, says Berrigan, because the making of peace is just as costly as the making of war, at least as liable to bring disgrace and prison. And so when we hear George W. Bush selling his book, speaking disdainfully of activists, well, being an activist is the dues we pay for democracy. And if we don't do activism, democracy is out the door. And so we accept our responsibility here. We're going to do all we can to stop the violence being perpetrated in our name. And so if the making of peace means prison, that's where you're going to find us. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Medea Benjamin doesn't really need an introduction in Washington, D.C. She's been a testifier, if not an invited testifier, at more congressional hearings than we can count. And she's here to be with us today. Medea.
Well, we are so proud here as Code Pink to be standing with the vets. And while the review is coming out today about what is happening in the war in Afghanistan, I want to talk about another review that came out, put out by a group called Save the Children. Of 160 countries, it looked at Afghanistan and said Afghanistan is the worst country in the world to be a mother. Now think about that. We are spending $320 million a day in Afghanistan, over $2 billion a month. And what is there to show for the Afghan people? What happened to that idea that if you lift a country out of poverty, it will not be a place that terrorism will thrive? Instead, we've spent our money on bombs and drones and killing people. What the studies have shown is that 1 out of 8 women in Afghanistan dies either from pregnancy or childbirth. 1 out of 8 women. It also found that 1 out of 4 children does not make it till the age of 5. Now that is absolutely shameful. All that money that we are spending is going to corrupt the Afghan people, making it, in another study, the 3rd most corrupt place on earth. So I say, as a mother, as fathers, as Code Pink women and men for peace, that it is high time that President Obama gets a clue and understands that we need, as our sign says here, a real peace president. We need men that understand that the best thing we can do for our security and the security of the people in Afghanistan is to take the money that we are spending on war and invest it in people, invest it in healthcare, invest it in education at home and in Afghanistan. And we will be much more secure and we will be much more loved. And people in Afghanistan will be much healthier, safer, and happier. So we say thank you to the vets for bringing us here. We also say we encourage everyone to get arrested, but for anybody who isn't, please join us at 2 p.m. outside the Justice Department, where we will be delivering thousands and thousands of petitions calling on Eric Holder to arrest the real criminals, the war criminals, and not WikiLeaks. That is 10th and Pennsylvania at 2 p.m. No arrest of WikiLeaks, arrest the war criminals. Thank you for what you're all doing today. Let's end these wars now.
For taking this initiative, for having a demonstration across from the White House on the very day that the Obama administration and the Pentagon released the so-called review of the surge. And you'll see in the papers today, if you haven't seen it already, that they're reporting some progress. What does that mean? They have destroyed 1,000 or more homes in Kandahar. Surging troops land in Kandahar. People flee. Then the U.S. government decides which of their mud homes will be destroyed by mortar fire or missiles. Progress, according to this report, is that thousands more Afghans have been killed. There was a recent poll taken asking Afghan men in southern Afghanistan whether they knew about September 11th, whether they knew about hijacked airliners crashing into the Twin Towers. 92% had never heard of the incident. There were no Afghans on those planes, according to the U.S. government. And yet tens of thousands of Afghans are dead today. On the other side of Afghanistan is Iran, and this government is threatening more war against the people of Iran, even though they have attacked no one. And on the other side of Iran is Iraq, a country that will be perpetually occupied until the occupiers are driven out, either by the American people or those whom they're occupying. This is Obama's war, and it was Bush's war, and before that, sisters and brothers, let's not forget, it was Clinton's war, because Clinton carried out economic sanctions against the people of Iraq, and more than 1 million, according to the UN, perished because they could not get food or medicine. A genocide in slow motion. So we see it's not simply Obama or Bush or Clinton. We live in a period of endless war by an empire whose real interests are the banks and corporations on Wall Street. And we here today, as we go to that fence at the White House, say, this is not our war. None of those are our wars. It's not our empire. We want money for jobs, education, housing, things people need, not for another war for empire. Thank you, sisters and brothers. Thank you, Veterans for Peace.